Welcome to episode 203 of the CUInsight Experience. I'm Randy Smith, one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and this season I've brought on a co-host.
That's me. I'm Jill Nowacki, the founder and CEO at Humanidei.
This episode is sponsored by Trellence. Trellence is a leading technology partner for credit unions, delivering innovative technology solutions to help credit unions achieve more with a comprehensive suite of analytics, cloud, and talent solutions. The Trellence team ensures credit unions increase efficiency, manage risk, and improve member experience. And we are grateful for them supporting this show and letting Jill and I have this much fun doing what we're doing. This season, Jill and I are having conversations centered around leadership, credit unions, and living our best lives. We have some exciting guests lined up for you that we are grateful enough to call friends from around credit union world, and they will join us in these discussions and offer insight. And we happen to have a very special one coming up on the very next episode. Jill, you want to share who that is?
Absolutely. So on our next episode, our friend Mike Valentine, the CEO of BCU out of Illinois, is going to be joining us. Mike actually happens to be the person I gave a shout out to in episode 200 as well. And we'll be talking to him just before he goes in to be honored with the Herb Wegner Award too. So very excited to have Mike join us.
It's going to be a fun conversation. He is a great guy and a future guest of the podcast. So we'll have to link to his other episode if you can't wait 2 weeks to hear more of Mike. So, but please come back. Anyways, today, let me tell you a little bit about our topic. We're exploring an important question, and that's what's the difference between creation and innovation? In a world where disruption is constant, should credit unions be focusing their time, their effort, their money, their talent on building something entirely new? Or is the real opportunity in improving and evolving what we already have and what already exists today? And maybe more importantly with our discussion today is how can leaders strike the right balance between the two? Jill, I know this is something that you and I have had conversations about and that you've thought a lot about. So when it comes to leadership and the future of credit unions, I guess let's start with, do you see a difference between the word creation and innovation, or the words creation and innovation?
Yeah, I see a difference in it. You're talking about creation and innovation. I'll say my working title and kind of my thoughts on it is actually creation versus innovation. So I looked at it maybe a little more either or on this too, with this kind of question about, to your point, what's the difference and what is it that we need right now? And so as I've been processing through this and thinking through this, what I feel like is that maybe creation is a little more radical than innovation. And so it pushes things a little further. Maybe it's a little riskier. And so that said, I think there's a time to maybe be radical, to be a little pushier, to be a little more bold. And so it's left me kind of wondering, when is it necessary to go so far as creation? And is that when things are going badly? Is it when they're going amazingly? Maybe you have a little more room to make a mistake or take one of those risks? Or is it when kind of everything's just sort of blah, that you need that creation? You need something to like stir things up and get them moving on it. So that's kind of I think my natural tendency is more toward innovation. It's more toward incremental steps. And I guess because of that, it caused me to challenge myself and say, okay, but when is creation the right choice? Like I know what I naturally tend toward, but when is it really time for that creation? So what do you think about that?
When we were thinking about this topic probably a month or so ago, I remember thinking, it's like, do we really create anything new? That type of a thing, or do we just
have a conversation with like a little kid and they'll be like, I want to invent something, but everything good's already been invented. And like, It's like that kind of, right?
And to an extent, and that's so in my mind, creation is bringing something entirely new into existence, right? And I would use this as an example. I mean, I know we had mobile phones before the iPhone, but the iPhone was completely different than any other phone. It was suddenly, our music was on there, everything. It became even more than a personal computer. Our laptops weren't doing what iPhones were doing. So like in one sense, I feel like what Apple did there, they created almost a new space, but I was going back and forth. Or did they just innovate mobile technology? Because then on the flip side, I was thinking about Tesla. We happen to have one. They didn't invent the electric car. There were Priuses out there for many years beforehand, but they brought in a different delivery system. They brought in software updates that go on and you get better gas mileage suddenly. They did things differently. So that was very innovative. I agree with something that you said completely. Creating something new can be very risky because you don't know if the public's ready for it. If you came out and you're like, hey, we were a credit union, but now we're creating an entirely new way to do financial services, your members might not be ready for it, even if it is the future and brilliant. And what are the development costs? Where when I look at innovation, I believe a lot of the time innovation is market driven. And I think in credit unions, most of us would say I'm not sure if we'd even say fast followers. Some are, but that idea that often the innovation comes from experiences that we are having in other areas of our life. You and I talk all the time about, and I know others do as well. There's such an ease of use that it's almost too easy when we go to, say, Amazon to order and it comes to our house and we don't have to put in our address every time. We don't have to put in our credit card or debit card or whatever happens to be. And it's a seamless kind of easy process. And so when we start to think of like, if that's the experience people are having everywhere else, how much of digital banking and things like that has the innovation come to meet the members' all experience? So I guess that'd be my opening thoughts.
Yeah. And so it is kind of, particularly with something like financial services where trust is so critical and people are so concerned about keeping things safe. Like when I worked at the credit union, we would talk about like places to infuse creativity in the organization. And it was like, go ahead and keep that out of accounting. We don't need creative accounting practices, right? And so, but I think one example that we might be able to look at, and maybe you'd push back and say, nah, it's just an innovation on the way things have always been done. But maybe something like blockchain-based decentralized finance is a disruption to financial services, whereas digital banking, using AI in your lending decisions, those kinds of things are just strengthening those current systems. AI is not creating new loans. It's just improving the process of how we put loans into place. But blockchain's different than what we've done. And going back to that question of credit unions, early adopters, I would put that question on both financial institutions, but also consumer readiness. When you do go back to that idea of, do we want something brand new with our finances? And how ready are we? How hard is it to adopt that?
And I would even say how much training and education has to go into it for people do have that safety and security. When debit cards were first a thing, people thought those were people were going to steal your money. You mentioned something interesting because I do think we're seeing a whole lot go on the innovation side when it comes from AI. And I'm not claiming that neither you or I are AI experts by any stretch of the imagination. I was listening to a podcast and I said, you should listen to this. It's fascinating with Chris Sacca was the name of the guy's name on the Tim Ferriss show. And I know credit unions are using AI a lot. Our good friend Chip is down here right now and he's talking about the AI they're using in their job. He's in technology sales. But I think that's interesting when it comes to whether it's loan approvals, whether it comes to fast tracking mortgages, whether it comes to, whatever, those different types of processing things. It feels like there's probably going to be an uptick in maybe, if you want to say, the speed that the expectation of things being done and the ability to really do a really good job of really defining the risk that's involved if you take some of the human element out of it. Now, that one I would like to throw out to you because we also know that AI models can be skewed one way or the other and things like that based on past history, right? At this point, I don't think it's the end all be all, but I do think that how disruptive and how fast financial services are changing. AI seems to be speeding that along even faster. Even when you said maybe we don't want to necessarily innovate accounting, there might be less accountants going forward, right? Like we don't
want to get creative with accounting, but yeah,
right, yeah. We don't want to be creative, but my guess is the tools that they're using aren't the same ones that I used 30 years ago when I was getting an accounting minor. So,
right. Well, yeah. So I was so engaged with what you were saying that I missed if there was a question in there.
Well, the one I kept talking after it, I think. So that was my fault, just because I have so many thoughts on this from an innovation standpoint. I like innovating. I get bored so easy, so I chase shiny objects. I did ask, we do know that AI isn't perfect, and when it comes to using tools that it sometimes maybe could take on biases of the past, if that's the right way of saying it.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I guess when you go into this creation versus innovation side of it, and then you bring AI into this conversation, which to your point, interested from the podcast we watched, but not an expert. Maybe we can get Lamont Black on a future podcast with us or something, but since it's not either of our wheelhouse exactly. But I do wonder a bit if maybe what AI demonstrates to us, and this may be wishful thinking, but maybe AI is a tool in innovation, but we still get to leave it up to the humans for the creation of it. There's a meme floating around or something, which is like, why are we using AI to create art? Like, I want to live in a world where, the machines do more of the drudgery work, like the housework and the clean, like the laundry and that. And I have more time to create art and writing and poetry and stuff versus like, instead of using the computer to create art, well, I still wash Crosby's dirty clothes. And so there's kind of that, again, maybe it's wishful thinking, but I'm like, I want to still feel like I'm in that creator position, like I'm building something or making something happen, despite the fact that I started this by saying, well, I'm more into the incremental improvement on things, really reinventing something on my own.
There's a question that was kind of running through my head, and I don't know if I have an answer yet. So maybe if you do, it'll spark something in me. But like, how important do you think? I mean, just from the early parts of this conversation, it sounds like we both believe that innovation is extremely important, and it's important in the credit union space, but quite honestly, in any business. How much do you see collaboration and partnership playing a role in that?
Yeah, so I did 5 minutes of research on the topic of creation and innovation before I came into this. And one of the things I was curious about is kind of like what research exists on this, beyond this podcast, assuming we weren't creating the first ever conversation on creation versus innovation.
Maybe we are.
So one of the tidbits of information I came across is this research from 2007, so not that long ago, by a guy named Keith Sawyer. I know, I'm still stuck.
Okay, I'm looking at Jill's face there when she's saying 2007 wasn't that long ago. We're talking 20 years.
Some of the research was from like the 60s. So this is into my lifetime, and don't tell me. So this research from 2007 by someone named Keith Sawyer, his theory of group creativity. And what his research suggests is that creation is often more of an individual act. Innovation is social. And it absolutely requires collaboration and iterative improvement. And so when you think about like something that I love about credit unions is how cooperative and social we are in nature. And so when I think about that concept of, okay, innovation needs collaboration as a catalyst. Innovation needs collaboration in order for it to really take off. So are we uniquely positioned to leverage cooperative efforts?
Because I think we even have like businesses that are based off of this.
Oh, are they called CUInsight?
The CUInsight things, right? Like,
So, put a plug in. CUInsight is going to be seeking a new CEO soon, but yeah. I mean, and
Humanidei is doing this search. So Jill at humanidei.com if you're interested.
But yeah, absolutely. What an embodiment of that idea that if collaboration is a catalyst for innovation, and do credit unions do it better? Yes. Look at CUInsight. And what have they been designed for? Primarily for innovation, for improvement, to help credit unions do a better job delivering what they do.
Here's another, I guess, let's call it a talking point more than anything. So I'm not sure if there's going to be a question at the end of it, but I think of conversations that I've had on the podcast in the past around leadership and about, if you want to call it like change management, like bringing teams on board. If people are like, oh, why do we have to keep doing things different? Like, because innovation is going to be a little different. You'd like to think it's going to be better, but we're going to have to learn new skills. What our desktop looks like will probably change. There's a new app to click on, or an icon, or whatever it happens to be. You work with a ton of teams. You work with a ton of leaders on a day-to-day basis. I hear you on many of your calls. I think there's like so many questions I could ask you here, though. But like whether it's from like the board level, and they're like, we need to be innovative, or we need to grow, or when it's you're talking to the CEO or a senior leader, in a credit union, and they're like, we have to innovate, we have to do this better to stay relevant, to use that word. But man, I'm struggling to bring my team along to get the buy-in. Is there anything when you think of those like progressive credit unions that you're working with that always seem to be on the forefront of innovation in our space, in our movement. What are they doing right? How are they getting all the team members on board? And I mean, quite honestly, that has to flow through all the way to the member adoption.
Yeah, great question. And there are so many different factors that I think go into this idea of, I'll just say, being progressive and continuing to advance. So there's the actual kind of creativity, vision setting, innovative ideas that start. And there is, in order for innovation to actually be meaningful, it requires implementation. I was actually just talking about this today, and I know it's something I've told you in the past, but sometimes credit unions or organizations in general, they spend a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of time in putting on these really engaging, like strategic planning retreats. And everybody has a great time at the retreat. And at the end of the retreat, everybody's inspired and everybody's excited. And it was the best planning session they've ever had. But what do they do next? Because the strategic planning cannot be an event. It must be ongoing and iterative. And too often, I think it is an event. It's something that happens at a retreat. It's not something that the team then figures out how to implement best practices in change management and implementation to actually carry it through. And so that's where what sets those organizations apart that actually achieve innovation. And again, my perception is that to achieve innovation, you must have implementation. Are those organizations that can be effective in change management, effective in goal setting, probably smart goal setting, as much as that might be like an old school thing, but get those specific measurable goals down, identify who's accountable for achieving them, track the progress toward them. And you know that I recently became certified to use Patrick Lencioni's 5 behaviors of a team. And one of my favorite functions of this is this idea that truly high-performing teams will hold one another accountable for the results. So the CEO isn't there saying, did you do your job? You better do your job. How are you doing with your job right now? The team is saying to each other, are you on track to get your goals? If not, how can I support you? What resources can I give? Hey, I'm waiting on you to give me that deliverable in order for me to get mine done. How do we keep it moving forward? So it's really that holistic team approach, not like a top-down approach to accountability. And then that drives results. So I think that makes that difference, is that you've got to have probably a visionary, creative-minded CEO or board or something in that area so that the ideas have permission to come into existence. But then it's about implementation that makes something truly innovative.
I can think back in my own career. At the time, I didn't realize it was a struggle, but it was a frustration where, you have those meetings. You're like, we should do this. And then you have the next meeting and it's like, so where did we get on that? Well, we should do this. Didn't give any direction on just because
that was a great idea.
I thought it was going to start moving, but there was it wasn't like, why don't you do this? You do this, you do. There was no defined. It was just like, we should really look into that. We should try that. Well, who's we? There's all kinds of people in the room. I am a firm believer, though, when it comes to those strategic planning type meetings, that there needs to be a defined first step. You should leave the meeting with, we are doing X. And it may be like, what tools do we need? What tools are out there to implement this? But having that very first step that's going to happen. And hopefully while everybody's still excited, where it's like, yeah, this would be amazing. Okay, well then this department, whoever it happens to be, let's start moving on this. Let's circle back quickly, not next meeting, 1 week from now. What early wins, what early steps can we take that really do move us forward? And something that else was running through my head the whole time, and I'm sure people on the podcast get sick of hearing me say this, but it's that idea of it doesn't have to be 100% of what you hope it will be someday. You can start rolling it out. You can start implementing smaller versions of it. You can start working it into, I would say, at credit union, certain departments, even if it's, not rolling out credit union wide or membership wide, to really, number one, see if it's going to work. If it's what we actually are looking for, does it improve things? And then I think with all innovation, you have to constantly be checking to make sure it's what you're innovating is actually worth doing, that you're not creating more issues or more complexity, because that quite honestly doesn't do any good either. So
It just reminds me of when Crosby was little and he would try to, he still kind of does it sometimes, but where he would try to like innovate something. And so he'd create this like really complex tool in order to push a button. It's just faster if you just push the button, man. Like, so instead of like the, but also
have a finger.
Yeah, come on. But what you were saying, I have a Post-it note on my desk right now from a couple of weeks ago. And also I share this because I'm hoping if I say his name enough, I'll manifest an interaction in real life. But Post-it note with an Adam Grant quote that is, just make it exist. You can make it good later. And so that idea of don't wait until it's perfect to roll it out, market test it, do whatever. I have it because I'm like, every now and then I have to write something into existence. And it's like, well, I don't want to write it down until I have 6 hours to do it and I can get this. Start the framework of it, because once that gets out, you keep iterating, keep improving, keep pulling it together. But
I think that's so important. And for the CFOs and the accountants out there, I have seen it all too often over the past couple of decades where people make huge investments on something that there might not have been a proof of demand. So that's just something that we've always done at CUInsight and we continue to do today is like, okay, if this is the idea, sure, this might be, we hope it could look like this someday, but what does the basic of it look like today? And there are things that we're rolling out this year that have been, have been bouncing around my head for 7-8 years. But that last year we took, actually a few years back, we took with like a mini con, we took first steps towards it. Now this year we're rolling out even more that are coming. And that to me is, here's the vision, and I talk with my hands a lot. So sorry, this is audio, but here's the vision. This is what we'd like to be. Great. Where do we start today?
Yeah. So I think what you're talking about is that concept of like the minimum viable product, the smallest thing you can do to bring it into existence, and then see what worked about it, what didn't work about it, and continue to improve upon that. So I wonder, though, going back to this idea of creation versus innovation, when we talk about that, it's like, do you create the minimum viable product and then you innovate on it? And then if you historically look back on that, do you see it as creation or do you see it as innovation?
To me, it's semantics, but it always feels like it's innovation, but you are creating something new for, say, your credit union, like for your organization. In my mind, whether it's credit unions or any businesses, I think if you're a business that solely focuses on creation, there is a lot of risk for failure, market resistant, development cost, all this type of stuff. But one that only innovates, like how do they differentiate? I guess is the word that's popping up into my head. I think there needs to be a little bit of a balance of both, right? I would tend personally to lead more with the innovation and trying to be a faster follower. That's the one thing I would, if I had one ask of the folks around our movement, and I think we've done a lot better job over the last few years, is follow fast. You and I have talked about this before on that podcast you just listened to. This idea when people are making 5 or 10 year strategic plans, goodness, come on. I mean, 1 year from now, things could be completely different. But I think as we look out even a couple of years, that strategic plan, it may still be, I'm not saying it's not viable, but it sure has to be flexible because we might not even know whether it's technology or the way that our member expectation changes because of other things that happen around in whether it's in their professions or just how we all do things. And that to me is where we all have to be. We still plan. Like we still have to make sure that we're getting that information as soon as possible. And I think from a leadership perspective, that's a certain amount of learning that you really have to stay up on. You can't be like, well, my marketing department or my IT department will keep us up to date on that. You better have at least in my view, you better have a pretty high understanding that you're asking the right questions. It doesn't mean that you have to go out for the training, but I would sure hope that you're able to, no matter where you are in your career, able to still have those discussions and go, oh no. Because you brought up blockchain earlier. There was a time when people were bringing up blockchain and I remember hearing credit union CEOs go, that's for drug dealers and stuff. But it's like, okay, maybe they were the early adopters, but is the technology something that was not only coming, but is it superior to what we've maybe been doing for a long time? And if we're not keeping up, that's the one thing I would say from a leadership perspective is it is so important that we are staying up to date on everything that's going on around us, and it moves fast.
Random observation.
Yeah.
Okay. So are drug dealers the group to look to see future innovations? You just mentioned blockchain and crypto, but like I also feel like they were the early adopters of the pager too.
Oh, geez, so, all right. Yeah.
So
that's funny. You went there. I went with doctors, to tell you the truth, with the pager. It seemed like they were always
maybe not. But anyway, just say, maybe we need to look in different places for creative and new ideas. But as you were talking through this concept of like, hey, you can't just delegate innovation and creativity to the IT department or the marketing department. What it makes me think of when you think of the role a leader needs to play in moving an organization toward innovation. In our leadership development program, we talk with the emerging CEOs about what's your leadership style? And it's something that you should be intentional about cultivating. And in order to do that, you should be cognizant about different approaches to leadership. So for example, you might have an authoritative leadership style where you're more telling others what to do and being more directive. You might have a more coaching style where you're really bringing people along. But one of the leadership styles is called pace setter leadership. And the idea of that is if you want your organization to move fast, to innovate, it's not like you tell them what to do and you follow it. It's that you set that pace, you run at that pace, you bring people at that pace. It tends to be a faster pace. And it can be hard for an organization to follow and emulate, but because the leader is setting the pace and working at that pace, it brings folks along. So you want your IT department to do it. It's not telling them to go out and do it, but it's also not doing it for them. It's not being the one who's doing the IT innovation, but you're setting that pace that everyone's going to run at in their own way and through their own evolution with that. And so that kind of concept of like, I guess going way back to that question about like, how do organizations get things done? I think the leaders have to be ready to set the pace and run at that pace themselves too.
I have to give a shout out here to our CEO at CUInsight, Greg Mikulik. Over the holidays, he was just early on. He basically did an audit of all the tools and technology and everything that we use. And as he was doing that, he was also looking at what's available because there were many tools that he'd never used in his career before. But it wasn't just like, okay, well, that's what Robbie uses in sales or Alyssa's using in marketing or what, like John's using to manage the site. It was like him looking at all of it and wanting to have a basic understanding and then going down kind of those rabbit holes of, well, if we've been using this for 3 or 4 or 5 years, what else is out there? And which ones have improved where now they do multiple other things? And I thought not only as a way to really understand how CUInsight runs, but just to want to know, like want to be able to have those conversations, want to ask the right questions. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was awesome. Hence the shout out. But that to me is something that we all have to be doing, not just when we're new into the position, that when we're looking at it and we're like, well, we've always done it this way. Like we all hate that. But how often do we stop looking at it because maybe we have more teams reporting to us, let's just say, or we have more experts in the room. We don't have to be the expert of everything, but I think we do have to have a general understanding or at least curiosity of what is available and what's out there and does it fit to make us a better organization. So
absolutely. Yeah. So great shout out to that leadership style. And I guess that kind of brings us to our ending point here. I'm jumping in, so I get to ask first this time on the key takeaway. So, create versus innovate. So we talked through it. We talked about the pros, the cons, the distinctions. What's your key takeaway from the conversation today?
It was something that actually came, I think, maybe midway through or later on when we were having this discussion today. But that idea that, and you kind of posed it as a question, is it creation when you're doing something new for the credit union, right? Like that didn't exist. And that to me is, I think it is really important, is like, are you creating something? It seems like a lot of the times this focuses around technology, but like in the end, we're credit unions, we're community organizations, we're member driven. The key takeaway is making sure that we're staying on top of the innovations that are going around us and trying to be a little bit faster followers. And that being said, going back to don't just have great ideas, like say in the boardroom, in the executive suite. who else has those ideas? Are there channels to bring those through where the person who is actually dealing with the members is like, it seems like there's this that we could be doing that would do this better? Is the person who's maybe earlier on in their career is like, I'm doing this on my own, on my side hustle. Why are we still doing it 10 steps this way? Where are those ideas? So I guess my takeaway would be stay curious and more than anything, don't leave the room until you have a first step.
Yeah.
Like, do not walk away and say, we'll put this on the agenda for next time. Take a step. So that's my takeaway. What's yours?
First of all, I just have to say, I love that you talked about that concept of a good idea can come from anywhere. We work with organizations that are aspiring to be more inclusive, to create that workplace that is great for all of their team members, recognize that concept. And we have some cool innovations that we can point to that at least legend says came from anywhere. So like flaming hot Cheetos were the janitor's idea. The right. McDonald's value menu was one of the cashiers at a McDonald's. So things that are well known, those ideas didn't come from the boardroom on that. But I came into the conversation wondering, like, we're going to, debate the merits of creation versus innovation here.
We don't debate. We discuss.
And so what I came down to, I guess my key takeaway is that when organizations can make that growth mindset happen, when they can build it into their entity, what they have to do is encourage both that creation and that innovation. So they have to balance that need for, like, I don't think you asked the question during it. I'm paraphrasing, but you essentially said, can you stay relevant if all you do is innovate, incremental changes there? And I think you do have to balance groundbreaking ideas with that necessity of continuous improvement. So put that thing into the world, make it exist, but never stop improving upon it, or never stop improving upon the way you serve your members, your clients, your folks there. So.
Absolutely. Well, that is, I think, a good way to wrap this up. A few things before we go. Number one, who's going to be on our next show, Jill?
Mike Valentine.
Right. So
Yay!
don't forget to come back for that conversation. You all will love it. Mike has been an amazing leader in our space, hence the Herb Wagner Award coming up here for all of us that will be attending at GAC. But above and beyond that, as always, we'll link to everything we talked about today in the show notes. Maybe we'll even put a list of Adam Grant books in there just to help Jill get that out in the world even more. So maybe someday she can meet him. If you have any thoughts, please share. Jill's all over LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, ask questions, give feedbacks, future topics, who you'd like to see on the show to have these wide-ranging conversations with us. We would love to hear from you. Please also take a minute or two to check out our sponsor, Trellance, in the show notes. Trellance is the leading technology partner for credit unions and a great supporter of ours to help us have this much fun doing what we do. So please, please, please give them some love. Also subscribe to the CUInsight Experience on your favorite podcast player. We're on them all. So if you're Spotify or Apple, whatever service you pay for, we're there too. And if you're looking for, like I said, the book mentioned or any books mentioned over the past couple hundred episodes, the CUInsight Experience podcast book list in your next read is on its way from Amazon. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. Y'all rock. We appreciate you spending the time with us, and we hope to see many of you in DC here in the not too distant future. So with that, Jill, any final thoughts?
One quick one. You're not expecting this, but so on our last podcast, I absolutely butchered the name of the author of Unreasonable Hospitality. It's actually Will Guidera. And what's super culturally relevant to those of us in credit unions right now is I just learned today he's the opening keynote speaker for the GAC.
Yes, he's going to be there. So
it's going to be great for our book club.
Right. So everybody pick up the book. We can all talk about it there over a cocktail. So with that, can't wait to see y'all. Be safe. Be well, friends.